Hello, this is One Last Look with me, Nate Marcel. Today's book is going to be a child's book of poems, pictures by Gyo Fujikawa, which is a male Japanese name, but her father named her after an emperor. She was born in Berkeley, California in 1908 and went to an art college in LA, where she then started doing promotional material for Walt Disney's Fantasia. And I'm going to try and get through this pretty quickly. The last one took 25 minutes, I think. I'm going to try and cut that down a little bit. Some interesting things to note. I am going to get rid of this book. This book was in a house fire. It was in my parents' house fire in 1991 or 92. I've been carrying it around since then. I used to use this book as a drawing board because it kind of perfectly fit an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. It's now, just as you can see, cracked and falling apart. And the poems are classical poems. They're not particularly interesting to me, and her art, if I want to replace this book, it will only be a couple bucks off of Amazon or Barnes & Noble or someplace like that. I have been carrying it around with me enough that I feel kind of hoardy by hanging on to it any longer. But now it's time for one last look. See inside front cover, you can see again that smoke staining that happened. So I really see like a lot of kind of influence of Fantasia in her work. One of the things I've never really appreciated a whole lot was this kind of round pumpkin head with the button eyes and button nose approach. She is very, very line dependent and I think kind of obvious in her work. A lot of very clear static contour lines, filled with a lot of cross-hatching. Check the cross-hatching out in this image. Let me try and get a little bit closer in here. You can really see the intensity of that. And what happens is very decorative on the outside. She's obviously, influenced, at the same time by, I would say, somebody like Maurice Sendak, who is a little bit more wild and a little less consistent with the way, especially his paintings, turn out. And it's interesting, I think, that although she puts a lot of texture and definitely does a lot of stippling and things like that in her work, as you can see, sort of in some of the backgrounds here, you don't see the cross-hatching that she uses in the pen and ink, whereas in somebody like Maurice Sendak's work, I actually have a cover of one of his Where the Wild Things Are books here. Something else to visit at some time in the future is this copy of Where the Wild Things Are. But this was purchased at Cameron's Books in Portland, Oregon, back in the mid-90s, I believe, for 35 cents. Yeah, but you can see the way Sendak uses his cross-hatching. It's a lot more wild, especially, varying the width around the contour lines, perimeter lines, and even the way he treats the cross-hatched areas against the painted areas. So that's just a little bit of juxtaposition, because she was definitely a contemporary to Sendak. She was one of the very first artists to really include multiracial images throughout her work. Here's a black wink and blink and a nod, which I've never seen before. Usually they're depicted as fat white cherubs, right? Here's the sugar plum tree. A lot of different textures, very decorative, flat image on the outside. Some of her stuff really used to freak me out as a kid. Something like this, not so much, of course. This is just a very kind of regular gouache painting, but we get to see her attention to a kind of shimmering effect that she likes to do with a lot of same sized pieces that are falling or sort of making perforated lines is another thing that she'll do. In fact, I'm surprised that this line here that she's using from the spider's web isn't a series of dots. We'll see some more of that later on. Kind of like what she has here in the rays of the sun. These are made by perforated dots. I call it perforation. Here we see none of that kind of line dependency, much more painterly approach, and some really nice kind of atmospheric perspectives, complementary colors, and a kind of soft, almost Garth Williams effect in the squirrel and the tail, the texture of the tail there. She can definitely evoke some, heavy kind of sentiment. I remember looking at this dog when I was a kid. I had this book since 1979. I think I got it for Christmas or a birthday present, and I remember feeling really sad for something like this dog. Right, the poem is "Old dog, why do you lie so still? Are you thinking of when you were a pup? Are you longing to be a pup?" I mean, some of it obviously was the content of the poem itself. "Old dog, why do you lie so still? Will you never wake up? Won't you ever wake up?" It's very sad, and especially kind of confronting the existential ideas as when I'm 9 or 10 or something, whenever I would read this book. These are some of my favorites, and these remind me a lot more of kind of Mary Blair in a strange way, especially maybe the almond eyes, but in this case she's showing multiracial children, which is awesome. Look at the cross-hatching in this page right here is almost worth the price of admission. I'd say, let me see if I can get in here. You can see just the intensity of the line and just the clarity of the contrast in these areas too. The texture in the background, it's almost like a coloring book. Very open lines. Let's see if I can get back up here. Owl and the Pussycat, not the best Owl and the Pussycat, I have to say, but communicates the point. And the Owl and the Pussycat is always like kind of a much wilder poem to me. The incongruous ideas of owls and cats and pigs living together and cavorting, and this kind of doesn't feel like to do that justice. Very surface level image. Here's that. So those little shimmering dots of sand, she does that well. Plays those textures, lost and found edges on the edge of that sand. But of course, everything else in the image is very, kind of hard-edged. Here she's using the fairies in that kind of falling motif or shimmer. All the fairies kind of look the same. They could almost be the exact same fairy, just in different positions. But again, it's for an overall effect of motion. The frog itself has a lot more personality than a lot of her children do. This is kind of a sweet image. My Valentine, I will make you brooches and toys for your delight, of birds' song at morning and starshine at night. I will make a palace fit for you and me, of green days in forests and blue days at sea. And of course, this is Robert Louis Stevenson from A Child's Garden book of garden verses or garden. Anyway, Robert Louis Stevenson, and here she's shown to older people, and I love the cane has dropped away, and he's actually recovered some of his youth by looking in her eyes. I think that's very nice. She herself was never married, although she was engaged at 19. And again, I mentioned that she was born in 1908 and she died in 1998. So she spent a long time engaged to a person. I don't know what that story is. This always used to bother me, the calico cat and the gingham puppy and fighting and stuff. I never used to like that as a kid very much. Nice direction of light here, and leaving this space open. This is a very strange poem, and I think that the drawing that she uses for this, let me try and get in a little bit closer here, is also equally, a little bit of Goya going on in there. It's a little bit more wild, and it's interesting in a lot of these images, there's a kind of artifact of a Xerox process or something, as you can see in this little weird highlight. I'm just going to read this poem because it's very strange, by Oliver Wendell Holmes. Look out, boys, clear the track. The witches are here. They've all come back. They hanged them high. No use. What cares a witch for the hangman's noose? They buried them deep, but they won't lie still, for cats and witches are hard to kill. They swore they shouldn't and wouldn't die. Books said they did, but they lie. This is one of those much sweeter kind of images. Very kind of one-dimensional, a little bit of Renaissance, a little bit of Hayam in here, I think, especially in the female form. And I think her name is Tracy Hyman. I can't remember. Here, I love this tiger. This tiger makes his way onto the cover. Again, a lot of these images are revisited for the cover. Here's the cover of the tiger. One of my favorite images here, and it very much kind of feels anime or Hayao Miyazaki or something. I really get that really nice direction of that wind blowing through this willow tree. The willow tree is a perfect subject for that kind of perforated line. The distance, the atmospheric perspective, and just there's a nice wildness to the way that the watercolor is treated. I certainly don't care for her adult features that much, especially when she uses the button nose and the button eyes. That was something that was always a little off-putting to me. Instead of like a thought balloon, she's kind of perforating the sound balloons for the sounds here that are coming out of the clock. There's some stuff that reminds me a little bit of Grandma Moses, but certainly she's has more skill, just technical handling than Grandma Moses. But some of the colors remind me of hers, and also some of the compositions. We'll see one here in a minute. I do have to kind of bring this up. This is very much kind of Garth Williams or something in here. This is treated quite a bit differently, and also the texture in the sock itself. I love the bulging of the toys inside the sock, and then we get into the different textures of the toys themselves. I wouldn't be surprised if she had her own line of Christmas cards or something at that time. Look at that field of daffodils. That's pretty striking, isn't it? And again, it's interesting, like a lot of texture, a lot of overlap inside and around the daffodils, a really complicated image. However, no cross-hatching. She's building up all of those values with the color. There's another one, the elf and the dormouse. That's good. Here's a boy's song, where the hazel bank is steepest, where the shadow falls the deepest, where the clustering nuts fall free. That's the way for Billy and me. By James Hogg. Nice vignette. She is able to get quite a bit of depth, especially in her paintings, but she always kind of throws away the foreground and kind of equates it with the background too. There's some better examples of that coming up. Here's another one of those very tight-knit cross-hatched pieces. Very stylized ocean here, and pretty wild looking as well. Here's the Eskimo, and it's interesting because she was the commercial artist on the Eskimo pie brand. So if you see the little Eskimo and Eskimo pie, I don't know if they still use that. I'll have to look next time at the store. But she did the image of the little Eskimo. So again, going to that kind of illustrating different races. Here's another, well, a lot of the male faces will have a lot more depth in them, a little bit more personality of the lines. Here's Queen Mab, not the Shakespeare's Queen Mab, but Thomas Hood's. She has a little silver wand, and when a good child goes to bed, she waves her hand from right to left and makes a circle round his head. I've seen that happen. Here's the naughty boy. And To an Insect, another Oliver Wendell Holmes. A knot of spinster catids. Do catids drink tea? I think that's how you pronounce it. Never been able to pronounce it. Here's this crazy pink page, pink and green, and you can see that staining. I think that these also got very wet in that fire. I can see that on the edge. Go a little bit faster here because we're at 15 minutes. Very cartoony crocodile, and the fish as well. They kind of remind me of some of Disney's fish, like in the Sword in the Stone. A little bit of a different kind of picture compared to some of the other ones we've seen. And again, I think these were some of these might have been done for this book itself, but I think a lot of them were reprinted or collected from other works that she did. Here's the I know I could be wrong about that too. I'm not sure. In fact, until I started knowing this was going to be the first book I was going to use for this video project, I didn't know very much about her at all. So all the stuff I know is just from stuff I've gleaned off the internet. Here is one of those male faces that's kind of fully realized. It still has the very black eyes, but the features themselves are more realistic, I guess, naturalistic, compared to the sheep here, which are just little spirals. And here we get that kind of overall design of those daisies falling in the air. Here's the eagle. He clasps the crag with crooked hands. Close to the sun in lonely lands, ringed with the azure world he stands. The wrinkled sea beneath him crawls. He watches from his mountain walls, and like a thunderbolt he falls. That's Alfred Lord Tennyson. And again, this is a very different kind of image. And in fact, it almost looks like some Chinese brush painting down here on the rocks. There's something new happening just with even the composition. I feel like there's something much more bold and strong. There is some cute element in this little bird off here on the side. Little do we see right after this, that bird becomes the eagle's food. But regardless, there is a different kind of quality to the image. Here we have that kind of perforation again around that outside line for turkey time. This is one of the more of those kind of Grandma Moses pieces, flatter and land, but she definitely understands kind of the camera point of view, what she wants to show. These faces here are quite a bit different, look much more cartoony, and a little less skilled, I think, just in the anatomy and the way they're handled too. Maybe she's trying something new, which is fine. Interesting, the heavy outlines in the sheep here. Hard to see those sheep without those heavy outlines because the white of the gray of the sheep's fur and the background yellow are almost the same value, right? So that's a good choice. Here, this face of the girl used to really bother me. Some of it is the incongruity, right? The inconsistency with the other faces. You can kind of see that. But I love the cats. The cats are wonderful. And the tree is pretty spectacular as well. And again, part of, I think her draw is just how much labor that she can put into a piece. Soft, very soft dog there, and there's a lot of attention on the texture of this curtain that's hanging inside the window. Is Mr. Finney's turnip. Mr. Finney and his wife, they sat them down to sup, and they ate and they ate, and they ate that turnip up. And here again, there's a little bit more naturalism in the face of Mr. Finney. Perhaps not his wife, though, and she looks a little like Holly Hobby or something with that big thing she has on her head. Here is some of that, more of that kind of background watercolor. Love this spring and that kind of scintillating or shimmering effect of all the blossoms in the tree and how they're falling off the tree. It's really lovely. Frogs, again, the overall pattern of the frogs is nice. A lot of movement and a lot of depth in this piece, even though it's so flat, and we really have two disconnected areas of the painting. We have the background here and the foreground of in the tree here, as well as the swing. But boy, is there motion and just kind of an elation in this piece that I think is wonderful. And probably next to the eagle piece, one of my favorites. I'm not sure. I think that here's that perforation with this little fly that's flying around the ostrich heads, and I'm not sure, but I believe that this is going to be technical pen that she's drawn with, rather than most of the time, rather than a croquois pen, but I could be wrong. It's hard to tell sometimes, but it seems like that there would be a lot more variation in the line width if it was a croquois pen. I think that may be also a difference between her, Garth Williams, Maurice Sendak, Mercenary, some of her contemporaries. I love this piece. Again, there's a really nice kind of element of depth and also contrast with these grass blades. And here, I think she's sacrificing a little bit of the mystery and the darkness that she could have brought into the foreground here against the background. But in this case, also, you get a really nice sense of like the light that's shimmering on that shell, the sand, like all of that may have been lost if this had gone darker. So I will not criticize her choices there. I love it. So anyway, here's the index of titles. Here is the index of first lines in case you forget the titles. And here we have the index of the authors. Christina Rossetti seems to have the most poems in the collection. Here's the back of the book again. And again, that damage, fire damage. The fire, I believe, was caused by a pot that had been cooking on the stove. So just a warning to you all. Thank you very much. This is the first time I've done this, and I've been wanting to do it for some time. I hope I get better. If you don't like my voice, of course, and I should have said this at the beginning, maybe I did, but just turn the volume down and just look at the images. And if you have any suggestions, let me know. Otherwise, thanks for watching.